talk, real talk, real talk, real talk, real talk.
Welcome to Real Talk for Real Teens, the show where we uniquely combine the information teens need with the entertainment teens want.
Hi, guys. Welcome to another episode of Real Talk for Real Teens. This is Kim Creighton, as always, your host. And today I have Steve Culbertson on the line. I'm here to talk to you. Steve, why don't you introduce yourself to my audience?
Hi, everyone. I'm Steve Culbertson, as Kim said, and I'm the president and CEO of YSA. We are the umbrella organization for the youth service movement, and we work to activate young people ages 5 to 25 throughout the world. We work now in 135 countries. We activate kids to change the world, and we support them with grants and training and technical assistance and all kinds of cool recognition programs. So we've been in business 27 years, I guess, and I'm just delighted to be with you all today.
Well, thank you for coming, and you just on your intro, you hit on some things that I want to talk about, as well as, first of all, tell us what 21st century skill you'll be talking about today.
Well, we're going to talk about creativity, and I want to make an argument that the most creative people on the planet are young people, that they're wired for it, and biologically, I don't care whether you live in Canada or Cameroon, young people are wired for creativity, so I hope we can get into that subject.
All right, let's jump in, and why don't you give us your definition of creativity?
Well, my definition of creativity is not, as some people would maybe immediately think, that you start or you create something from nothing. To me, the most creative people are those who really are dot connectors, those people who can look at two separate, disconnected ideas and to bring them together creatively into something that fashions into what I call a 1 + 1 = 3 or a 1 + 1 = 5. Let me give you an example. When I went to Hamilton College in upstate New York, on my bed when I got there was a copy of The Facebook, and it was a book that had all my classmates in it and all their information and interests, etc. And when Mark Zuckerberg got to college, on his bed at Harvard was The Facebook. Any kid who goes to school in the Northeast, has this. And what Mark did, though, was he took it and he combined it with the Internet, and he created a 1 + 1 = 5, and in his case, like 5 billion. But my point is that I think you take two disparate ideas and you bring them together and you look at the world in a completely different way, and that's the essence of creativity. And you can call it innovation, you can call it entrepreneurship, but I think ultimately it's the creative people who change the world.
Wow, you just schooled me on something new, because I just assumed that the Facebook was at Harvard. I didn't know it was a regional thing and that it had been going on for years. So
oh yeah, forever. Everybody in the
example.
Northeast has that crazy Facebook. Yeah.
Yeah, and
it was called the Facebook.
And
the original. Sorry.
No. I'm just saying that's a great example of what you're talking about. You know, he saw something that had been going on for years, something that every student had been getting, and he was the one who put that 1 + 1 together to get 5.
Exactly. And I think a variation on that, Kim, is what a lot of social entrepreneurs today, and entrepreneurs in general, and I don't think there's really not a big difference between a social entrepreneur or a business entrepreneur. But they use the expression disruptive technologies or disruptive behavior. How do you disrupt the way that something has traditionally been done or presented? And again, that is, I think, an essential element of creativity. People who can look at something that's been done the same old way year after year after year after year And, these are the people who color outside the lines, to bring it back to an artistic metaphor. But they color outside the lines because they look at something and they say, why does it have to be done that way? Why can't we think about, and in the social space, it might be health, it might be education, it might be human services, it might be human rights, it might be the environment. Mm-hmm. But why do we have to look at it the same way that we always did? And let's disrupt that old way of thinking and create a new way of thinking that's better, smarter, healthier, safer, all of the above. And I believe that young people are wired for that idea of novelty, and they're willing to take the risks. It's not a coincidence that Gates and Zuckerberg and Jobs and Hewlett and Packard and Bristol and Myers and all these, great entrepreneurs in American history, it's not a coincidence they were all teenagers. I mean, they started this stuff in their garages and their bedrooms. These were not full-fledged adults. These were curious young people who look at the world in a different way.
And that's one reason that I'm reformatting and refocusing the show, because the 18 to 25-year-old is that group for me, because for some reason I find that once we get over 25, we forget that we're young, wherever a young person, so we get put on this adult thing, and we lose something there. We get caught up in just our everyday lives, our responsibilities, and all these other things, and then we become too afraid to take chances, too afraid to start something in our garages. And then those young people, you're right. It's in all of us, but I'm not going to say but. I'm going to put a period on it. It's in all of us. But what I find though is young people haven't had that life experience of just being beat down so much, or that perceived thing that we as adults often take on. They don't usually have that much baggage. And even if they've been through traumatic situations, they still have that thing of, I can do this. Right. I think there's a lot of that development in their adolescent brain, that invincibility. Who are you to tell me I can't do this? I can do this. I might not know how to do this, but I'm going to figure this thing out.
Yeah, and I wouldn't discount the science, as you say, as part of this. I mean, we know brain development goes up pretty much through your 25th birthday.
Exactly.
And we know that during adolescence, that because we, and again, this is true of kids, whether you're talking kids in Africa or kids in Asia or kids in Latin America or kids in the U.S., it's all the same, is that the human being is wired to separate itself from its family and to go out and create its own unit, whatever that looks like in terms of their life. And so in adolescence, as you begin to rebel, against sort of the format that, was your cocoon and protected you growing up, then you want to break out of that cocoon and be on your own, which we need you biologically to do that because that continues the species. So this whole idea of wanting to go off and do your own thing and to follow your peers, we know that young people, for example, listen to other young people more than they listen to adults. They're always checking their behavior with their peers. And again, that's another important biological survival mechanism. But this whole idea of kind of breaking away and wanting to do your own thing and, seeking novelty, seeking new things, willing to take risks, these are all inherent, in our genes. And I think what we see, the result of that, is new ways of looking at the world, new approaches to old problems. And when we ask young people to help, which we do in my organization, we ask for their contributions. We want their compassion. We want their new ideas. We want to change the way that the world works to make it better. They're able to deliver those ideas, frankly, that we just don't get from adults.
Exactly, and they're able to deliver them in a air of confidence that says, "Why shouldn't this work out? I don't understand. What do you mean no? What do you? Huh? What? It's like, huh? You're not making any sense.
Yeah, because an adult can't wait to tell you, oh, that'll never work, right?
Exactly. I mean, and we see it every day in their fashion choices. I mean, just look at You know, everybody's upset about the sagging pants and the this, that, and the other, and why they're doing this. Every generation has had that, and we want to act like there is something new. No, you can look back at the flappers. Did their parents not think they were the end of the world? I mean, their behavior was just like, oh, my God, they're showing their knees. You know, it's just like it happens.
Yep. The only thing that worries me about the saggers is that comes out of the prison culture, you know, because they won't let you wear a belt in prison. So because of, you know, obviously suicide issues and, you know, belts become weapons and become a problem. So people in prison don't wear belts, and therefore their pants are sagging, and so that becomes kind of a look. You know, it's not something that maybe we want kids to emulate. But anyway, we can talk about that all day.
Yeah, and I was about to say, but even in that though, the young people who are doing it have never been to prison, probably don't even know anybody in prison. Right. And so they've taken that and just changed it into something else. And so and whether we like it or not, it's what happens, and that's a part of their creativity. They've
innovation.
Branded it or whatever.
That's exactly right.
Yes, exactly. They've taken it, just like the Facebook. I mean, might not agree, but they've taken it and made it their own, and
that's right.
They are feeling empowered by it. So I don't agree. I mean, yes, it looks awful sloppy to me, but you know, I'm just like, hey, if I don't have to see your bare behind, I'm good. I don't need to see that. You know, I don't need to see that. So give us some, because another thing I want to talk about is one of the 21st century skills that I added that I find that was missing when people talk about the 4 C's and 21st century skills is that international ed piece. And the fact that you guys are all over the world, I'm intrigued because so many of our young people have no idea about the world outside their communities, yet alone the world beyond U.S. borders and the things that they can impact or more importantly will impact them internationally. I tell people all the time this is the first real generation that can be U.S. citizens and live abroad for the rest of their lives. Yeah,
and I would totally agree that young people today have an opportunity to be global citizens, unlike, you know, many in previous generations. And a lot of kids, you know, they know a lot more about the world than they even think they do. They know how to pronounce Afghanistan. They know where it is. They know where Iraq is. You know, the international community has been in their face. If you imagine, you know, these young people who are coming of age in the millennium, you know, they were told in 1999, then when the clocks flipped to 2000, the baby Jesus was coming and the ATMs weren't going to work. And exactly. You know, so far neither one of those has been has been a result of us changing into a new millennium. But we did see 9/11. We saw the extraordinary tsunami in South Asia. We've seen the war in Afghanistan, the war in Iraq, the Chinese earthquakes, the Pakistani earthquakes. All these things have been incredibly kind of in your face. If you're a young person, you know, you can't move from any of your social media or television or you know, any kind of media that you're consuming without having that thrown at you. And so kids have grown up basically to understand that the world doesn't have borders in the same way that I was raised. And also that problems don't have passports. You know, AIDS doesn't have a visa to come to the U.S. Malaria doesn't need a passport to move among young people in different countries in Africa and Latin America. You know, so problems don't have passports, and therefore, you know, we live on this sort of pale blue dot, you know, hurtling through space, and we realize it's a pretty small place in a pretty large space.
I like that problems don't have passports, because that is so, and opportunities don't either. And so
that's right.
It's like you can go out there and when I was growing up, if I left Georgia to go to California, that would have been a big deal. Now it's commonplace for your organization to send you to Japan and you work virtually. That is just how things are. So tell us, I want to get back into the creativity thing, but I want to have that international worldview kind of edge to it. So let's talk about that. How your organization, because you're working with these young people, and they're working on these projects all around the world, and they're being very creative. So how does it happen?
Well, what I first want to make sure that your listeners understand is that these are Brazilian kids solving Brazilian problems. We don't send Americans to Brazil presuming to understand that culture, that language, those challenges. What we do is we really challenge and activate kids in the local community, whether it's in 36 countries now in Africa, all over Asia, all over Latin America, Europe, and then, of course, the United States, Mexico, and Canada. But the concept is really the same whether you're working in the U.S. or not, and that is to ask a young person to reimagine themselves in a different way. And I'll give you an example. I was in Lesotho, which is a small country in southern Africa, completely surrounded. It's a kingdom, actually, surrounded by South Africa. And this black African girl, 16 years old, came up to me and said, "Steve, you're the first adult that's ever given me permission to change the world." And literally 60 days later, I was in New York City, and a white Jewish girl, 16 years old from Long Island, came up to me and said, "Steve, you're the first adult who's given me permission to change the world." Well, what are we doing to young people where they need or feel like they haven't gotten permission to impact the world that they live in, and they're already 16 years of age. They can drive. They've got major responsibilities. Many of them are working. They've got a good education, a good chunk of their education under their belt. And it just struck me, why would that be such a foreign thing? And in fact, they don't need my permission. All I was trying to do is get them, ginned up and excited about social change and to activate them and encourage them and talk about the value system and how much, we need them. We can't afford for them to grow up before they start changing the world. But I think we've got a lot of work to do, whether it's in the U.S. or Russia or Brazil, to where we can really message young people that we need them. We need their energy, their commitment, their idealism, their creativity now. The worst thing you can say to a young person is, "You are the leader of tomorrow," or "You're a future leader," or "You're the hope of tomorrow." Because if you're the hope of tomorrow, what are you today? Nothing. If you're a future leader, what are you today? Nothing. So kids don't live in the future; they live in the present. And you and I know we could walk into any second-grade class in the world, and there are leaders. We remember that. We've all been in second grade. We remember there were leaders in our class. So the idea that leadership is reserved for some age group is preposterous. And in fact, young people have always been at the center of social change. And so we need them as much as possible to be bringing their good ideas to bear on the issues that are facing us.
And to encourage, as we talk about creativity, encourage that in meaningful ways. Don't say, what am I trying to say? Don't say, "Oh, I have youth involvement," just because somebody's on the board, but they have no say. Don't say, "I am," "Oh, yeah, we have a great student government here at school," but they can't do anything. Every time the group comes up with an idea or something they would like to make transformative change about, if it is out of line of what the administration or what the status quo, when we're talking about that, then we say, no, can't do that. Can't do that. And that becomes frustrating, and they say, "You know what, forget it." What's the point?
Yeah, exactly. No, it's got to be authentic. It has to have meaning. And there has to be, look, we're not calling for anarchy. We're not calling on young people to take over the world. We're just asking them, to have a seat at the decision-making table, and it's an authentic seat. And if you imagine that first decision-making table, it's basically the founding fathers, and they were all fathers, and they were all white, and they were all Protestant. Maybe John Dickinson was Catholic, but it was a pretty homogenous group. If you imagine that decision-making table today, it's chaired by a black man whose mother was from Kansas and whose father was from Kenya. And it's a very rich and diverse table, but there are still no seats at that table for young people in an authentic way.
And I was filling out a survey yesterday, and they were like, what is one of your biggest goals? And I don't know where this came from in me, but one of my biggest goals, when I know that what I'm doing has really made an impact, I want to take a delegate of young people to Davos, Switzerland, for the World Economic Forum. You have all the world's leaders there, and there are no young people having meaningful conversations there.
Yeah, have you been to Davos?
No, I listen to the thing I've started listening to it every year on the when they.
Yeah.
But
I've never been. I'd like to go.
Exactly, and I don't know where that came in my head, but I've had that dream for at least 10 years. When was working with young people in Chicago, and in Ida school time, I was like, I would really like to take, because a lot of the stuff that happens in Davos doesn't happen in the meetings. It happens in the hallways and all those other things.
Sure.
And I really like for young people to be able to walk through the halls and walk up to a Bill Gates and have a conversation, or walk up to, a leader of some country and just start having a conversation, an intelligent conversation. Because I watched it last year, one of the things they kept talking about was unemployment rates for young people around the world. Well, why aren't young people a part of those conversations? Nobody on that panel was under 30. It's like, and I would say most of the people on that panel were well over 40, 45.
Well, the old metaphor that people used to use, and you can't use it anymore, but it was, imagine having a conference at the White House about African Americans in the United States, and not inviting any African Americans to the conference. Well, that doesn't work so well anymore because of the first family. Yeah. But the idea is still the same: is why would you have a youth conference or talk about youth issues and not have youth at the table? It doesn't make any sense. And and young people in particular, I mean, we've got 6-year-olds that are doing city planning efforts. We've got 10-year-olds that are CEOs of nonprofits. We've got 15-year-olds who are global ambassadors, on issues like hunger and homelessness. So don't tell me these kids don't have capacity. Don't tell me they aren't leaders of today. Don't tell me they aren't the hope of today. Don't tell me they aren't disrupting the old way of doing things with new ideas today. But I also tell kids, look, the history of the world is a history of power. And if you want power, you have to ask for it. I mean, look at the gay rights movement. Look at the women's rights movement. Look at the civil rights movement. These people didn't get handed power, easily. And 70 years in a row, women petitioned the Congress with legislation to allow them to vote in this country. And, people waved the Bible at them, and they waved all kinds of stereotypes at them and said, oh, no, women can't vote, they aren't smart enough, men should dominate and women should be subjugated, etc. Just read about it, it's in the Bible. Well, when you've got that kind of attitude, social change takes a long time, and those 70 years must have been awfully frustrating to women who just wanted to have a voice in the government that controlled them. But imagine that on any other issue, and anybody else out there, power does not come. It isn't handed to you. You have to ask for it. You have to prove that you're worth it. And this is the work that we do every day, is young people are getting up, and they're showing that, one, service is power, because you're not a recipient anymore, you're an actor, and that's the number one definition to me of power is when you act, and what they're proving is that they have enormous capacity, and that other people will follow them because they're young.
And when you listen to combine that. And when you combine that capacity with that level of creativity, that level of invincibility, that level of, well, why doesn't it work? Well, let's fix it. Then you really have that movement that happens. And it doesn't have, when you have all that behind it, it doesn't take 70 years. It can really get going, because once these young people get on fire about an issue, they are like a dog with a bone.
Well, and you imagine the tools they have. The average kid today in America, walking through the Bronx where you are, or walking through Washington, D.C. where I am, the average kid has more tools in their hands than Bill Clinton had when he left the White House.
Oh, my God, that smartphone
in terms of
everything.
Technology. And then now imagine that half the world's population is under 25, 40% of the world is under 19. We have more young people on the planet than any time in history. We need to cash that check. We need to really support that youth bubble and to really activate those young people, to be looking at these issues of poverty, looking at these issues of health, of AIDS, of malaria, of water quality. The fact that waterborne disease is the biggest killer of children in the world, that malaria is the largest disease that kills children. These are problems that we need to put young people up against to solve, and to call on them to be part of that solution. That's how we're going to change the world. That's how we're going to make it a better, safer, smarter, more equal place for everyone.
Yeah. Well, we're going to take our break, and when we come back, we're going to Steve is going to give you your 3 tips for developing creativity.
Follow us on Facebook at Real Talk for Real Teens and on Twitter at RTFRT Radio. New or unknown music artists, we need you for the show. If you'd like your own mini concert, please send a request for information to realtalkforrealteens@gmail.com.
All right, guys, we're finishing up our conversation with Steve Culbertson, the executive director of, is it YSA?
YSA, yes.
Youth Service let me get it right, Youth Service America. And he's going to end his time with us by giving us 3 tips on how he would help suggest or advise you guys of developing your creativity skills.
Great. Well, the first one I would say is figure out what your spark is, because that's going to be what makes your work in your creativity sustainable. So, if your spark is running, if your spark is playing lacrosse, if your spark is designing websites, if your spark is dancing, if your spark is singing, if your spark is reading, if your spark is taking care of kids, whatever it is that gets you out of bed in the morning, really try to figure that spark out and get really good at it, because that's what's going to make you different and distinctive, and is going to help that creative process, because you come at it with something that you're passionate about and that you're good at. And so I always like to start with that spark idea. The second tip I would say is know your community. Know who's out there, who lives in your community, who is who and what are the needs of that community, because I think there's always an edge, and edges are what really spark creativity. If you're kind of floating through a rainbow and unicorns and trumpets from heaven, that's not where you get creativity. Where you find creativity is where you find some kind of an edge or a rough patch, because that startles you and causes you to want to try to fix something. So by getting to know your community and getting to know, are people healthy there? Are they getting an education? Are they well taken care of? Are seniors able to live independently? Is the water clean? Do people have reasonable access to electricity and to books and education and that sort of thing? So do a survey, do a map of your community in your head and even on paper, so that you know the world that's underneath your nose. And I think that's really important, is to not only know thyself, which is the spark, but also know your community, which is my second tip. My final tip would be to network. Join social media. Be on Facebook. Have a Twitter handle. Let your voice be heard. But be constantly creating and meeting new people. Go to people and say, who are 3 people that in your life that I absolutely should meet, who you think are smart and funny and creative. So you begin to develop a network of people that you work through. No one is ever successful alone. That's why one of the 4 C's is collaboration. But the only way you can collaborate is if you know other people. So, get involved in a club, get involved in a service group, get involved in a sport where you're going to meet some other people, or go online and join a discussion group, or join a blogging group, or find those communities out there. They're online and offline, and network. So those would be my 3 pieces of advice to any young person.
Well, thank you, Steve, for taking the time out of your very busy day to come and talk with us and to share your insight in the area of the 21st century skill of creativity. Wishing you and your organization continued success.
Thank you very much, Kim. I enjoyed talking to you.
All right, and you have a wonderful day.
All right, take care.
Okay, bye.
The Real Talk for Real Teens community is the premier membership organization for young professionals. Real Talk for Real Teens community provides the most comprehensive resources and education designed to advance the skills, integrity, and value of its members as professionals. Become a member at www.rtfrtc.com. Thank you for listening, and join us every Sunday through Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern for more Real Talk for Real Teens.